in Southern Oregon without heat in the winter. Is this ringing a bell at all?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
I haven't delved into it as deeply. Like I said, I'm guessing you'd be aware. Are you aware of Shane Radliff's and his Vonu podcast and the stuff they've
Right,
been doing?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking
So
about.
I've learned through osmosis through him, because him and I have been really good friends for years, and I kind of stole his thunder by jumping out on the road before he did.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But I just run around and do whatever I need to do to survive. But
There you go.
I haven't come across that yet.
Okay. So, but basically, I don't really see it because it hasn't been printed. Like I say, he was putting out something called the Liberal Innovator, and then it became known as the Innovator, and nobody's republished the Preform Inform stuff. Or Kerry Thornley's seasteading stuff. Now that all comes from the late 60s, early 70s. And like I say, it hasn't been republished, although give credit to Shane for republishing a lot of the Vonu stuff that Tom Marshall did.
Yeah, I know I know he's always on the lookout for stuff, and anytime he gets like his hands on something, he will try to republish it. I don't know if he's come across it yet or not. I'll have to talk to him.
I might still have a lot of issues of things that haven't been republished. Okay.
If you have them and are willing to share, that'd be great, because I know he's always amped to make digital copies of that and make it available to a lot more people.
And there was also a publication called Libertarian Connection and Invictus. These were also had some Vonu stuff in them as well. Okay.
Yeah, I've heard all the names.
Libertarian Connection was, okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. So basically I started living that with my wife and son, and I had a number of friends who were also living similar to that. Now, we're all living up in British Columbia, okay?
Okay.
So if you read Tom Marshall, what he talks about is two areas that he considers to be the best places to do this in. And that was really Southern Oregon, Northern California, and there's a middle section of British Columbia called Bella Coola, which has a very mild climate. And his rationale behind all that was, at the time, you have to realize in the 60s, we were still worried about nuclear war. Yep. So those are the two areas where there'll be no nuclear wind. So if they drop bombs, they're not going to drop them on Southern Oregon. They're not going to drop them in the middle of British Columbia. They're going to drop them in major cities. And then you have to worry about the wind. And these places wouldn't have any wind. So that was why he picked those two areas. And the climate is relatively mild. There is some winter, but not too bad. So anyway, between living that in vans and in sometimes remote cabins, I did that for quite a few years. Almost 10 years, really.
Wow.
So cool. Yeah.
And but then I had an opportunity to make a lot of money. Well, you can't be a van nomad and make a lot of money. So believe it or not, I went to Wall Street. So I literally lived in New York City for 25 years. All right.
Oh, wow.
I grew up in the shadow of New York City, so I sympathize with you having to go there, but I understand I understand the drive.
Okay, so it's nice to make a lot of money, because New York City is not a very politically free place at all. Okay, and you're never going to be self-sufficient. But being rich gives you another type of freedom. You can do anything you want, anywhere, anytime you want, okay, once you quit that lifestyle. So I quit that lifestyle around 2000 and went back on my own again. And I've been living on my own since then. Now, sometimes living in the country, but a lot of times now I would call myself an international nomad. And that's a very interesting thing, because, you know, I don't have a house. I don't live in an apartment. I live in hotels, literally.
Sure.
And until COVID hit, I literally wasn't in the United States very often, and I love van nomadism, and I'm always looking at vans, okay, to think about doing that again. But right now I'm internationally nomadism, because what happens is, and this is something that might not fit with the demographics of your publication RtA, but when you go to other countries treat you like a king. When you're in your own country, you are a chicken to be plucked.
Yeah.
So when I go to Singapore, or if I go to South Africa, if I go to Italy, they say, come on in, sir, because I'm bringing money
Yeah.
and I'm not taking away a job. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So they treat you like a king. Whereas if I'm in the United States, I'm just another taxpayer to be plucked and taken all the money from, and so on and so forth. And when you're offshore, the police don't want to bother you because they don't want any hassles with the American government. They don't want bad publicity for tourism. You see what I'm saying? So all of a sudden you have far more freedom when you're internationally mobile than you are in your own country in a van. Now, I still have to cross borders, so I go across border crossings. But guess what? This way, sir, because I'm bringing money. I'm bringing money. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, I stay in a hotel, and I have a life. I do everything I normally would. So it's a little bit different than the subsistence farming that I used to do. Okay.
Sure.
In southern British Columbia and other places in the United States. So that's sort of the history that I've been doing. But I was very fortunate. I never met Tom Marshall, and I consider him to be an unbelievable genius. But I mean, they haven't reprinted it, but in one issue, he talks about how to write. Like, how should your hand move while you're writing? So I adopted his form of writing. Okay, so he was a genius in so many levels in that he was an engineer, and he looked at everything and he said, what's a better way to do it, including things like writing, eating, everything. And so I just respect him so much. So much I respect him. I can't tell you how much I respect him. He's just amazing.
Oh, he was definitely an I mean, from what I've learned of him and stuff, and obviously you're even more well versed. But yeah, I mean, the guy was. I mean, people would call him weird and quirky, but damn, man, the way his mind worked, just like when Shane first introduced me to him, I was just like, we were both just blown away. We were like,
yeah.
Where was this guy hiding? How do we not know about him?
Right. Well, like I say, his other issues, which I think I might have, he literally tells you how to write, how to eat, how to, you know, everything, so that you don't have to have a job, you don't have to do any of that sort of stuff.
That's brilliant.
That's spectacular.
Yeah.
I will say though, the whole international aspect, I mean, it's always appealed to me in theory. Unfortunate, well, not unfortunate because of the situation. I have children that are still stuck in New York with their mother, who refuses to leave with them there.
Right.
And even before COVID, I was a little hesitant to leave the country because I was always worried about being able to get back in. I was going to ask you, with you doing, because I know a couple of people who do that kind of international van nomad, like you were talking about, or not, you know, just the nomad, just bouncing around and going to the hotels.
Right.
Do you just possess still just one Canadian passport? Do you have multiple ones?
I'm not Canadian. I'm not Canadian.
Oh, you're not. You were in British Columbia. So okay, so you just have a U.S. passport then?
I lived there for a long time. Yeah.
Okay, but so you just have one passport, then you don't have multiple ones, because that's something I know a lot of people have looked into. Okay.
Well, I think it's a good idea to have multiple passports, but I don't. I think that's a very good idea.
Okay.
It's not urgent because there's hardly any place I can't go with an American passport. There's just 2 or 3 countries I can't go to.
Yeah.
Right.
And to tell the truth, when you're walking down the street, people will assume you're American. So a lot of people will put a Canadian flag on their backpack or on their shoulder pad. So then, oh, he's not American. So then there's no anti-Americanism because everybody likes Canadians.
Yeah, I did that when I toured Europe.
They're so gosh darn nice. That's awesome though. But it definitely, even the international aspect, that does fit in with what we're doing, because
very much
you know,
so.
what our our whole thing. I mean, the tagline's self-care, sustainability, and self-liberation. But it's the self-liberation part that's the most important to me personally, because it's all about becoming as autonomous as you can and as free, like you were talking about, just getting as much freedom as you possibly can right now, because none of us are going to live to see the society we want to see on a large scale. That's just the reality. I mean, that's a reality I came to years ago, but why not try to be free right now instead of trying to like beg everybody else to get on board with it? Just find your own freedom. And that's what we're all about. I mean, that's what I'm about personally. Like I said, I've been doing the van nomad thing for almost 3 years now.
Excellent.
The first year and a half of that, I was in a Honda Element with my dog.
Okay, not so good.
And we traveled. Well, it was what I had, and it was kind of a rush situation. And
sure.
Now I'm in a Sprinter van. I ended up in a very sweet situation where I do have a job, but the guy I work for gives me the Sprinter van to use and live out of, and he pays all the repairs. So I can live extremely cheaply with my new dog, and me in the Sprinter van.
And that's a nice size van.
Yes,
and that's a nice size van.
Much more room, and yeah. So that's, I mean, this stuff is all I'm hearing is excellent stuff so
far. Same.
Well, one of the things that, like I say, I think there's some early issues that have yet to be reprinted yet. Okay, but what Marshall did was he talked a lot about every aspect of being free, and the one that he didn't do as much, but he did do it, of course, is the hardest one of all, which is the psychology of being free. That's the hard one.
That is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, because people are trapped. Have you ever read How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World by Harry Brown?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so it's related, right? His whole psychological part is really very much related to this topic. You know, there's other topics as well in there, and he was not a Vonuan by any means, but he would at least.
No, he was a straight up libertarian, but a great thinker, and
fine with me. Fine with me. I'll take as many of those as I can get.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So to me, it was he just opened up my eye to Marshall. I just can't. I could rant on and on and on about Marshall. But he changed my life. There's no question about it. No question about it.
I can, like I said, I can understand that. I mean, I didn't delve in anywhere near as deeply as you did, but he, just by learning about him and learning the stuff that I did, he definitely changed my life.
I think the biggest thing is that people get used to a certain lifestyle, and the idea of actually changing it radically doesn't appeal to them. I think that's a big problem. I think that
people have to be uncomfortable to change. I mean, historically speaking, that's what the motivator is. Yeah.
But I think everybody's uncomfortable living in a servile state, don't you?
I do, but I don't think they know that they don't have to be uncomfortable.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. They're stuck because they can't see that there's an alternative, because they've gone to the schools, et cetera, et cetera. And also too, there's another big element that I found is social. People want to be around their family. Well, how do you persuade your mom and dad and aunts and uncles and cousins and everybody that you're going to go live in a van? It's like, what's your job? So your immediate society of friends and family don't want you to live free either. That's a huge disincentive. And then making money is a huge disincentive as well, because it's harder. It's just harder.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what I think a lot of what Marshall did in the early issues was to say, well, look, yeah, okay, let's deal with all those things. So he was able to get a girlfriend with Roberta, so that helped the social aspect a lot, I think. And then he was just a hardcore engineer. So emotions were not as important to him as rationality was. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So everything that I was just talking about generally are emotional issues of not doing it. They're not rational issues,
Correct.
Because you can always get a job. You can always get money, particularly in the United States. It's falling off a log. You can always do everything you want in the United States. Now, in other countries that are much more autocratic, it's harder to do that. But here in the United States, come on, it's easy. Well, Marshall only worked part-time as a contract engineer until he disappeared.
Yeah.
And if you drive your cost of living down low enough, you don't have to work many hours to do that.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, before my new dog came along, I got myself living on under $100 a week, and I was set.
Yeah, that's right. And that all went to gasoline.
Yeah. Now I get that paid for too, so it's kind of sweet. But no, I totally agree with you. And that's the other thing that's just amazing about him is he came up with all these all these solutions that people are scared to look for, but he came up with them back then, before the advancement in technology that make it even easier in a lot of aspects. You know, I encourage people constantly to try to find some way. I'm like, there's so many ways to work remotely. You just got to look for them and you find them, and like you find something like that in this day and age, and it makes it even that much easier for you to just break free and be out and just bouncing around and go wherever and wake up with a different view every morning or every couple of mornings or whatever, you know, what have you.
So, so two aspects to that. One of them is obviously the internet has made it much easier really to be an international nomad, because you can now make money anywhere in the world. It doesn't really matter anymore.
Mm,
The other thing is I ran an organization called the New Country Foundation about 20 years ago, and it was devoted to setting up new libertarian countries. And that was a real interesting experience. And we got close once. Um, and that was something where I really got to know Jim Davidson, who introduced
mm.
us. How do you
Okay.
guys know Jim?
I got introduced to Jim years ago. I don't even remember how. One of a mutual friend of ours kind of put us in contact, and then I started working with him. We were going to do. There was a couple of projects we were working on that we ended up on together. He came out to my house when I was still living in New York. He came out to visit me one day. We spent the day together, and we've just kind of stayed in touch over time. And then I think I might have mentioned Jim at one point to Dharma, but her and the two of them just happened to connect in a Telegram chat group that we were all in one day, and they started talking on their own. And she told him all about the magazine, and then he was like, "Well, I think I can help you guys." And then he found out that I was connected. He's like, "Hey, I know that guy. I've been in his house before." So yeah, so that's how we're all now connected.
Well, Jim's a good guy, and I've known him, as I say, probably about 20 years, because we were looking at setting up a country in Somaliland, not Somalia. There is a difference,
I
but
love it.
Yes, yeah.
and anyway, it's a long story, but we actually sent Jim over there to put boots on the ground and to connect with some local tribal leaders. But we also had a Dutch guy involved who was married to one of the princesses in the area. So
Ooh.
we had a lot of things set up, ready to go. And unfortunately, our connection died. So
Yeah.
without the local help, it was not going to go anywhere.
I think he actually wrote about that recently. He wrote a piece about that recently that I read, I believe. He was
Recently?
recounting some of that. Yeah, because we had lost, he and I lost touch for a while. And then we reconnected again a few months ago. And one of the first things he said, he was talking about, he was on Twitter, you know, talking about all the stuff he wants to do. And he's like, "Oh, you need to read the stuff I'm up to now." And one of the pieces he had up there, he was touching on his experience in Somaliland.
Well, I
So that's
think
interesting.
it relates to his, communities here in the United States that he's working on. And there's a couple of those he's working on.
Yeah. Yep.
And starting a whole new country is a whole different level of stuff, but there are obviously some similarities. There are some similarities.
Oh yeah, there's definitely overlap there, and but yeah, I believe that's exactly what it was a connection with.
I wouldn't be
I
surprised.
guess, like I said, that's how he and I got really connected originally. One of the projects I worked with him on is we were trying to start one of those communities up in Ohio, around the date somewhere in between the Dayton Columbus
Yeah,
whatever triangle.
yeah.
We were looking to do that. So it's always something that's been on my radar. I now that I've been out of the road for a while, I enjoy the freedom of traveling. I never crossed the borders, but then again, I don't possess a valid passport at the current moment. I don't even know if they'll give me one. I've had my troubles with the legal system where they look kind of down upon me. So that's why I try to stay as much of a gray man as I possibly can these days.
Unless it's a felony, I don't think they can stop you from
I,
getting.
Yeah, well, yeah, but they do
What's
threaten
that,
to do
Dharma?
stuff
Sorry.
when it comes to the IRS. They threaten to do stuff too, and I've been ignoring them for years. So
The IRS has some influence with Border Patrol, but unless I think you've been charged or convicted of a felony, even then you just owe them money. That's all. So there's no.
yeah.
Because right now the border's open with Mexico, by the way.
Oh,
Well, no,
nice.
I know. We actually Dharma and I actually happen to have a mutual friend who's another van nomad who I worked with for a while, but he decided to take off for Mexico for the time being. He's gonna spend a while down there and think about coming back up.
Yeah. Well, I may go there in a couple of weeks and spend a month or so. We'll see.
Nice.
Borders open.
My passport was taken away in 2010 by the IRS
Why?
for non-payment of taxes.
But were you convicted or charged with anything?
Other than non-payment of taxes, no, just tax evasion.
Well, tax evasion is a crime, so they would have to charge you with a crime. You'd have to like go to a court and be put in jail and so on and so forth.
So far, just the judgment alone took my passport. They want a payment plan. They want it's a big mess.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah. So, but I can crawl a fence. I can climb a fence.
You can go the other way, huh?
That's right. I can go under a fence too.
I don't think they, I don't know. It's easy to get to Mexico. That's for sure. That's
Oh
right.
yeah, well, it's the getting there has never been really the concern of mine. It's the possibility of not being able to get back in. Which, like I said, if it wasn't for my kids, I'd probably risk it. But
okay. But my reading of the matter is, I'll tell you a story in a second. But they have to let you in. They may arrest you at the border for non-payment of taxes, but they'll want you to come back in. They're not going to stop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was living in British Columbia on Vancouver Island in a remote location. Okay. And I had a reason to fly to New York City from Vancouver Island, which meant that I had to go to Victoria, fly from Victoria to Seattle, and then Seattle to New York City. And I got in my car. Actually, I had to take a ferry to Vancouver Island. I didn't even live on Vancouver Island. I lived in one of the Gulf Islands. So I jumped in my car, took the ferry, drove to Victoria, and I go in to get to pick up my airplane ticket. This is pre 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Do you have your passport?" And I said, "I don't need a passport." And they said, "No, you have to have a passport." I said, "No, I don't have to have a passport." "No, you have to have a passport." I said, "No, I'm an American citizen. I'm going back to the United States. I don't need a passport." And they're like, "What? No, you have to have it." I said, "No, I'm getting on this plane. This is my country. I get to go in without a passport." And at the time, Canada and the US, you didn't have to have a passport to cross the border.
Correct.
You just had to have a driver's license.
Yeah.
So she calls over the supervisor and he says, "You have to have one." I say, "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." "Well, okay, yeah, you're right, you don't." Okay. So I get on the plane because I forgot it. I literally just forgot it. Okay. I was in a hurry. I forgot it. Who carries their passport with them, right? So I get down to Seattle and I'm just on a little plane, probably seats 30 people or something like that, because I'm going from Victoria to Seattle. So, and as soon as I got off the plane, 3 large gentlemen come and escorted me into a little room to say, "Why didn't you have your passport?" "I forgot it." "No, why didn't you have your passport?" "I forgot it." Nothing happened, but they didn't like the fact that now you could cross the border in a car without a passport, no problem. But on a plane, they wanted you to have a passport, even though legally I didn't have to have one.
So dumb.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah. Beauty of bureaucracy right there.
Oh man.
I feel sorry for them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well.
Think of how screwed they are in their heads.
I just feel bad the amount of like super intense indoctrination that they so believe, and there can be no alternatives because no one's told them about them. So it's just one way.
One of the things that really frightens me is with the new Biden administration, they're defining libertarians as domestic terrorists.
Yeah, well,
Biden came out and said, "I have to worry about these white supremacists, these, all these people, and libertarians is one of them." And I'm going like, libertarians are the most nonviolent people in this society, but they lump them in with, Aryan Nation. And I'm going like, no, come on, because libertarians are anti-government. And if you're anti-government, you must be a domestic terrorist. They've just redefined. They've redefined Vonuans as domestic terrorists because you're anti-government.
Yeah. I mean, they've been working on that for decades. They've been trying to demonize anybody that lives differently. So that's more of the same.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
You know,
No question.
the one bright spot out of that, because yeah, that was that idiot, that freaking psycho Brennan talking on TV about that. Um, but to me, the fact that they've actually now shifted to bringing libertarians into that conversation, while it has some negative aspects, I think on the positive side, the only way they would have done that is if the libertarian movement had actually gained more traction.
Yeah.
So to me, that tells me
Correct.
that there's actually now there's more of us, or at least people like us. So now because they've been trying to demonize the word anarchist forever,
Yes.
and that's seen a resurgence, and that saw a resurgence during the Trump years too. But the fact that libertarians, that tells me that despite how horribly they did this year with their selection to try to put into the selection, there's a lot more people, and they're starting to notice, and it's like, oh no, now we got to try to stop these guys too. So I
I
try to take
hope
the
you're
positives out
right.
of it when I can find.
I hope you're right.
Well,
I
I mean, I
hope
will say
you're
this. I mean, you've obviously been around this whole scene for a lot longer than I have, but I mean, I've been around for a decade or so, and I remember when I first came in and found all this stuff, and kind of broke free from all the indoctrination and whatnot. One of the first people I came across was Larkin Rose. And back then, he was talking about the fact that he had been at this for 10, 15 years, and he kept
right.
wondering where the hell everybody else was.
Wait a second.
And he
Who?
was saying, Larkin Rose,
I don't know that. No.
he's he's what they would call one of the celebritarians. He's wrote a bunch of books. He ended up going to jail for tax evasion, I think. But he's been around for 25 years now or something like that.
Uh-huh.
But he was saying that he couldn't find, like, there was nobody, and now all of a sudden the number, like, he could see the numbers had increased, slowly, but they were getting bigger. And
Yeah.
that was 10 years ago. And now here I've sat and watched, been around for 10 years, and I've met more and more people that are just coming out of the woodwork. So I think it may not be happening as fast as some of us would like, myself included, but the numbers are growing. People are starting to realize, and between just about everybody and their mother having a libertarian podcast these days, the information is getting out there more, with Shane reintroducing the world to Vonu. And I mean, from him, we've connected with people all over the world who are doing. We met. There was a couple that was traveling across Iran. We met a couple people in New Zealand and Australia, other parts of Europe, South America, and it's been great. It's like, and every one of us in our initial meetings were all like, "Oh my God, you're here too!" Like, we thought we were alone.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is,
Now,
like I said before, I don't ever expect to see the full scale society I would like to see in my lifetime,
right.
but I think a lot more people are shifting to. And another thing I told, including some of my other Vonuan friends who were a little freaked out with the COVID thing at the beginning about how it was going to restrict our freedoms and make things even harder. I tried to explain to them that the reason I am who I am today is I came through everything through the study of history. Most of my friends came through economics. I just was a history buff and started reading and reading and reading and started going, oh, wait a minute, this isn't what I was taught in school. This is not. So I started finding out. So I've been big on studying empires and the history of governments and what causes them to fall eventually and that stuff. And I kept saying, I said, no, man, you guys, you're not thinking this through. They overplayed their hand on this one. They clamped down so hard, so fast, that it's going to, a lot of people, even people you wouldn't expect, are going to recoil. And it's happened. Now, there's been a lot more conformity that I would like to see. I mean, currently I'm in Indiana, where I just walked into a Walmart and I was the only person without a mask. But more and more people that I've come across, I've talked to, when you present these ideas now in a certain way, all of a sudden they nod along. Oh yeah, wait a minute. Yeah, that makes sense. Why should I have to do this? Why should I have to do that? Why should I have to give the government all my money? This doesn't make sense. So I think I like I said, I try to take the positives out of all the crazy stuff that happens to us all on a daily basis almost. And I've seen a lot of positive change. I mean, there's been a lot of negative, but I've seen a lot of positive change in the last decade or so too. So I have hope.
Well, certainly libertarianism is far more overt and visible than it was 10 years ago. There's no question about that.
Absolutely.
But I look at it and I say, all right, now let's deal with the practicalities of it. What laws have been reduced in the last 10 years? Well, marijuana is legal, sort of. And I go, I don't smoke dope, so I don't really give a shit. So, it's like, okay, fine. So other people get to smoke dope. I'm happy for them. But, I'm going like, okay, so what other laws have been repealed? None. I'm right now, I'm in Nevada. And Nevada used to be a very libertarian state. And in many respects, it still is. But 2/3 of the population lives in Clark County, which is a Democratic town. So who gives a shit about the rest of the state? They almost don't count. We still have brothels. So what? I can go in and buy a gun and walk out with it as long as I'm not in Clark County. So that's nice. But you see what I'm saying? It's like, it's only libertarian because the people outside of Clark County are libertarian, but so many Californians have moved here. It's a Democrat state now. It's over.
Well,
and it wasn't a Democratic state. Now it's a Democratic state. And Arizona's Texas. You see what I'm saying? So I'm looking at this and I'm saying there's more ideas, libertarian ideas out there, but I'm not seeing the practicalities as much as I want to, because the left, the authoritarians keep moving stronger too.
Well,
but I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
I mean, I agree with you. I definitely think the state has upped their game to try and, maintain control. But
sure.
I look at smaller things within my big picture. So big picture speaking, you're absolutely right. What we see the masses moving towards is not all that much free. They're not repealing laws. We're not gaining freedoms.
Nope.
However, if you look on smaller scale, you see Bitcoin, a decentralized currency rise.
Yeah.
You find other digital currencies are on the rise.
Yeah.
You find more and more people finding a way to connect with their communities when it comes to trading eggs for meat. I'm finding more of that. I'm finding more bartering. I'm finding more, I have too much zucchini, I'll trade you some tomatoes. So I see more of that happening. I'm finding a lot of people that are over modern technology and kind of just want to go back to simpler things.
Yeah.
I think all of these little things are little wins to freedom. And I think, as you know, and as Silas knows, and as I know, some of the most free people in the world keep the lowest profile ever.
No question.
You have no idea what some of these people are doing, and they're living as free as possible. And so I don't think it's always fair to say our freedoms are not increasing as a whole. I think it's fair to say people are resilient as hell, and they are seeking out this information to become free, and they're not advertising it, which is a bummer for the greater.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's also really exciting to see these people that say, if you're not going to give me freedom, I'm going to take it.
So let's assume everything you say is true. I look at it this way, and I think I'm going to say what you said in a slightly different way. I don't think society is moving in a freer direction at all. Okay. Occasionally we get a collapse in a society that gives us temporary freedom. But that's few and far between. We have to get to a crisis before people will say we're throwing all the bums out. And we're not anywhere near that in the United States. But to me, remember, the same arguments applied in 1970 when I first heard about this stuff. Exactly the same. Okay. Now it turns out that it was actually much freer in 1970 than it is now. Okay.
Yeah.
But I was 18 and ready to go be put into, and I was draftable and ready to go fight a war I didn't want to be in. So in a way, it was way worse for someone my age. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So we don't have a draft now. That's a big step in the right direction. But so I think, but here's the point. I don't think society as a whole is getting freer. I think it's getting worse here in the United States.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that individuals can't be free. And that's the key. Right. That's the whole key with Vonu or RtA. It's like, okay, I'm surrounded by servile people, but that doesn't mean I have to be servile, or I can reduce the amount of servility. We still have to be servile. We still can't drive 120 on city streets. We're going to get caught. Okay, so we can't be stupid. Okay, but you see what I'm saying? We can live a free lifestyle. Yes, parts of it are worse than they were before, but parts of it are better because technology is also pretty liberating.
Right.
It's a mixed bag. So I just think that the focus has to be I can't change society. It is what it is, but
Right.
I can change my life right now. And that's the other key thing that I think that inspired me about Tom Marshall is he said, you don't have to wait for society to be free to be free. You can be free now.
Yes.
You can't be 100% free if you're going to live in society. That doesn't work. Let's be realistic. But you can be a hell of a lot freer than you are now. And you can effectively live a very free lifestyle as if there is no state. You
Yes.
still have to compromise. You still got to get a driver's license if you're going to drive your van. You don't want to be thrown in jail for not,
Yeah,
driver's license. That's just stupid.
I have all my slave tags, so they leave me alone. Absolutely.
Exactly. And that's what they are.
Or as Tom referred, what he referred to them as was legal interstates. I have those, but no, I would agree. I would actually agree with everything you said. I think it's funny. I'm always reminded there's the line that silly movie Men in Black, where Tommy Lee Jones says, Will Smith says something about people being smart, and he's like, no, a person is smart. People are dumb, stupid, panicky animals. Because that's exactly what it is. And that's what libertarianism, Vonuism, all of these, even anarchism, all these ideas, they're all centered around the individual.
Yes.
And like I said, that's what led me to living on the road for the past 3 years. Was just I reached a point. I had just turned 40. I thought a lot of these opportunities had passed me because I was over 40 years old. I had a successful business in New York. I had a house. I had kids. I was like, well, I'm too old for this crap. And then an opportunity arose because things went sideways with me and my ex. That I had this opportunity, and I was like, you know what? I'm taking this.
There you go.
I sold my house. I closed my business. I learned as much as I could through Shane and through Vonu and all that stuff. And I said, you know what? I sold my house, so I have some money. I'm going to go out and do this for a while. We're going to see how it goes.
Perfect.
And I had some insane ups and downs, which I'm currently writing about in RtA and the Van Nomad Chronicles. And I'm logging my journey over the past couple of years, the crazy stuff that's happened to me. But overall, I have never been freer. And like you said, there's still laws I have to put up with. There's still things I have to do that I sometimes would rather not. But overall, me personally, I've never been this free. I go pretty much wherever I want, whenever I want. I mean, like I said, I have a job, but I do expedited freight delivery. So I get paid to drive around the country and see places I've never seen before, get to visit and meet with other people, other Vonuans, other anarchists, other just normies, as I call them.
Yeah.
And I get to have conversations with people that I would have never come across.
That's right.
And look, it's been spectacular.
I think all liberation is self-liberation. That's what it comes down to. I can't wait for society to liberate me. That's never going to happen. So we have to be realistic. We have to be realistic.
Oh, yeah. my point. Well, I was just gonna say my point about the whole the shift, the paradigm shift that I see happening. It is on this individual level, like both of you were talking about. And one thing I would add to what Dharma was saying about seeing the more bartering and stuff like that, is the reintroduction of this idea of like the stuff Jim does with the different trying to build these communities. There's more of these going on everywhere now. There's John Bush and Derek Rose, who we spoke with. Dharma got to speak or got to connect with John Bush. They created the whole Freedom Cell network, and those are starting to explode all over the place. We have Shane running his Pasnia in Southern Illinois. There's now another Pasnia that's popped up in upstate New York because of that. And we're all trying to connect with each other and do our own thing, but stay connected enough so we can share tips and ideas and just form a wider network for when shit does eventually really hit the fan. We have people in place everywhere that are already bonding, that are already starting to do the self-sustainability stuff or group sustainability and like forming, forming different avenues of trade, food production, clothing production, all this stuff. Even the, taking care of the medicine, the medicine aspect too. Like all the, like we got people everywhere doing this stuff. And that's what keeps giving me hope is, you're right. The state it hasn't gotten any better other than, the marijuana laws, but for me it's a plus. But
it's fine with me.
But you're absolutely right in that regard. My point to that though was that, like, through my study of history and seeing all of this happen in real time, people make the reference to, like, we're watching, like I saw somebody put it on a meme once, and I don't think I could have done it any more perfectly myself. This is like getting to sit back and watch the fall of the Roman Empire with Wi-Fi.
Right.
Because that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing, like, all the things they're doing, the ratcheting up of the trying to strip away the genders and making things that a lot of people would consider degenerate, making those popular. Like, that's been repeated throughout history over and over and over again.
Sure.
And that always comes at the end of the empire.
That's right. Okay.
So that's how I look at it, that they're pushing, and that the system is going to collapse sooner than they would like it to. But overall, you're right. So that's why people like us, we just got to keep being free right now. And, I don't even preach it anymore. I just go out and live it. And when I come in contact with people, if they want to talk to me about it, I'm happy to share my experiences with them. Just because I learned a while back that, I could talk and talk and talk. I mean, I've been doing podcasting and radio for years, and I've talked, and plenty of people have contacted me and say, oh, I heard your show and you made me think like this and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't matter. Most people need to see these things happen. You can hear about it, you can read about it, but they need to they have to have some physical manifestation of somebody actually accomplishing these things to go, oh, wait a minute. So that's why my whole theme has just been like, listen, folks, I'm a moron. But if a technologically illiterate idiot like myself can figure this crap out, any of you can. Like, and I'm out here doing it. I'm screwing up, but you know what? I've survived. I haven't let my ass back in jail. And I'm more free than pretty much anybody else I know.
Well,
so,
I was talking to, the thing is that do I think we're in the end game of the US? Absolutely, there's no question. But I will say it's more resilient because it's still one of the freest countries on the face of the earth. And that's a remarkable thing, that we can bitch all we want, but the reality is it's still probably in the top 5 freest countries in the world. So that means it's more resilient than all the other countries, which will never have an empire, if I can put it that way, or their societies are dependent upon us and China, and that's it from an economic point of view. Do you know that the average poor person in America is richer than the average European? Because Europe.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Yeah,
well, I don't doubt that, because when everybody always talks, when all the leftists with the SJWs get all up in arms about the 1%, it's like, you don't realize every one of us over here is the 1%, because the average, the average income throughout the world, like, if you're making over $30,000, you're in the 1%. I'm sorry, guys.
If you're making $500 a month, you're in the top 10% in most countries.
Yep.
Exactly.
And that's scary. That's, that shows how poor other places are. Why are they poor? Because they're autocrats. They have a huge state that siphons off all the money. The United States is still one of the best countries in the world, and I think it's a disaster. But that's because my criteria wants freedom, and this country is just getting worse and worse. But it's still better. Let me tell you something about the United States. I've lived in London, Geneva, Singapore, okay? And I've traveled to many, 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 many countries, particularly Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Western Europe. And the conversation we're having never takes place over there. Libertarianism doesn't exist in any of those places. It's like you go to England and the head of the Conservative Party is one of the most draconian authoritarians there is.
Oh,
yeah. Like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be the freedom-oriented guy. At least give lip service. But he can't. He'll give No. So you look around that and you go around and you find like 5 libertarians in France and 5 in Russia. And, you know, the United States, we still actually have people that believe in freedom, millions of them. You know, we
Yeah.
still have people that say, God damn it, you know, I want to carry a gun. You don't hear that anywhere else. No other country says, no, you know, I deserve to own a gun. No, none, no countries at all. So I look at the United States, and as the United States slowly goes into authoritarianism, I go, well, that's it. Freedom's gone. Freedom's gone. The only country, I lived in Switzerland, and the Swiss people are very, very free. But part of the reason they're very, very free is every 4th house has a fully automatic weapon.
Yeah.
The
Czechoslovakia
authoritarians
too.
can't crack down because every 4th house has a fully automatic weapon because they have a citizen army. So they have the authoritarian thing of everybody has to be in the army. Every man has to be in the army
Yes.
for 2 years. And every year you have to go back and train for 2 weeks or something like that. But what it also means is that everybody's well armed and well trained at killing other people. So the state can't take over. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Same, and that's what saves us too. I hate to say it.
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely. You know,
No question.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. It's
Anyway, so
I mean,
that's
I've heard the story. I've heard the stories from everywhere else. So I know how, and that's another reason I haven't left. Like a lot of people tried to push me to leave, and it's like, why? Like, yeah, it's getting worse here, and it sucks in a lot of aspects. But like you said, it'd be a lot harder to live the way I want to live anywhere else. You know, like I drive around with most of the things I need, including some firearms that, you know, I probably wouldn't able to get away with in a lot of other places.
no. Now,
You know,
the thing with international nomadism is obviously I can't carry guns with me when I'm overseas. That's not going to happen. I don't have any freedom of speech. And because in most countries, if you lip off against the government, they'll put you in jail.
Yep.
Not places like Switzerland, but now there's, you know, like Canada has hate speech laws, and you go like, you know, I said to my English friends who are supposedly conservative, not libertarian, but conservative, and I said, you realize that if those laws existed in the 1930s, Winston Churchill would have been in prison because he said anti-German things and anti-Muslim things. You
Yep.
couldn't have had great Englishmen. They all would have been in jail with this law. So
Yep.
I don't lip off, right? I'm basically on one level a gray man overseas because you look as ordinary as possible and then nobody hassles you. But the other thing you do, and this is very interesting, is so I give up freedoms by being an international nomad. But on the other hand, who's taxing me?
well, yeah,
Oh, I fill out a form for the IRS because if I don't fill out the form, they don't like it. So, okay, I fill out a form for them. But taxes, I'll pay whatever taxes I goddamn feel like because they're not looking me in the eye. You see what I'm saying? They don't know what my income is. They just have to trust me.
Yep.
That's a lot of freedom.
yeah,
If I'm in a country and I don't like the things the way they're going, leave. You see what I'm saying? You just leave. You're on the next plane out of town. Big deal. So it has advantages and disadvantages. But do I feel like lipping off against the US government? Not really. I'm not highly motivated because it's not going to do any good. I'd rather just be free, as we were discussing before. You got to look out and be free and have your friends be free and your family be free. And that's about as far as I can influence. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to persuade Nancy Pelosi to reestablish the US Constitution. That's not going to happen.
No, but I think what we're seeing also now is we're seeing the younger generation homestead more. And
remember, I went through the Back to the Land movement.
Right.
So
it's happening again.
And we're doing it again. So what I'm seeing, no, you raise a good point. So what I'm seeing is a resurgence of many of the things that we did in the 60s.
Yep.
So back to the land, libertarianism, I think all of those things are becoming more important. Maybe Vonu is part of that as well, because people in their 20s are kind of looking around. I'm going to kind of digress slightly, but I look at Trump supporters as being anti-elitist. I look at Bernie Sanders supporters as being anti-elitist. One's on the right, one's on the left. But that's 70% of the American population is anti-elitist, i.e.,
Right.
in a way, anti-authoritarian, although Bernie's obviously an authoritarian and Trump's an authoritarian too. But they're different types, okay?
Right.
But my
Yeah, but,
point
but
is, you
to
got
your point, I was just gonna say to your point though, their followers aren't necessary because they believe only the positive rhetoric. They don't see the negativity.
Exactly.
So
and my
to your
point
point,
is,
I would fully agree with that a large chunk really is, without realizing it, they are anti-authoritarian. They just, back to our earlier conversation, they don't realize the possibilities. They don't realize that there is another way.
That's exactly right. And what I'm seeing is, so I would agree with you that there is a resurgence of these things. And I think that that's fantastic. Fantastic, because it means, as I say, I went through the back to the land movement and I lived subsistence farming. I did all of that. Okay. In fact, a personal friend of mine was the founder of Mother Earth News, John Shuttleworth.
Oh, no
Oh, that's
way.
awesome.
He was a libertarian.
I love that publication. I love that publication.
Well, it was even better when he ran it, but
I'm sure it was. But
Agreed.
I've been to a couple of other festivals. I've had a blast.
and John Shuttleworth founded Mother Earth News, and then he sold it, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that, and he made a few $1 million from it. And so, and I used to write a column in an underground paper in Vancouver called How to Live for Free. Now, what I focused on is where to get free food, where to get free shelter, where to get, all this sort of stuff.
How very Abby Hoffman of you. I love it.
It was fantastic, right? So I'll tell you one story. So this really taught me about the state, like real concrete. At the time, there was a big scandal because senior citizens, their Social Security was so low that they were eating cat food and dog food, right? This was the big news item, okay? So I collected up all my articles on how to live for free in Vancouver, and I took them down to the social welfare office. And I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you give this to all of your patrons, your senior citizens, so they don't have to eat cat food and dog food. They can eat nutritious, really good food for peanuts, because it's cheap. It's really easy to live cheap, okay?
Yep.
And they looked at me and they said, no, we're not interested. And I go, but aren't you here to help out poor people and senior citizens? They said, no, we're here to hand out checks.
Yep.
And I'm like, holy shit. They don't give a shit. They just got a job. And in fact, it emotionally sunk into me that they want poor people. Because if there was no poor people, they wouldn't have a job. And like, that really affected me. I'm like 19 years old. Like, holy shit, you're right. They don't give a shit at all.
Yep.
Not at all.
Not even a little bit. I grew up on the streets. And so I had a similar experience, just kind of living. I was a homeless kid and a homeless teen. And boy, you see how dysfunctional the system is when you're not included in it,
Oh, that's
and
right.
you can absolutely see the dysfunction and how people just lap it up. And so my entire life, I would look at society like, what the hell's the matter with you people?
Absolutely.
What is happening? You can't see this shit? Am I the only one?
Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I think when I talk to statists, I always tell them that story. And I say, so the war on poverty, who won? the war on terror, who won? What does the state do that a private company doesn't do better? Name one thing. And they think, well, the roads. And I'm going like, the roads? What are you talking about? Disneyland has roads. They're privately run. Do they have nice roads, or are they filled with potholes like in Chicago? And it's like, I'll tell you what they do better. They're the best mass murderers on the face of the earth. They know how to murder millions of people. No private company can even come close to that. Even if they sell shit products, they can't kill millions of people. And then all these people, the statists, they'll look at me like, what are you talking about? Like they're dumbfounded at that point. But here's the point. Well, that can't happen here. That's their response. It can't happen here. And it's like, I'm going like, okay, United States hasn't killed millions of people yet, but hundreds of thousands, is that good enough? And they've killed thousands of Americans, no problem. Their own citizens. Anyway, that's beside the point. the point is we got to be free. Okay, and the freer the better. So your point was you're seeing a resurgence. I think you're right, and I think it'll probably get more and more, because my point of bringing up Bernie and Trump was that people feel disaffected with the power structure.
Yes.
And the bar for a Frenchman to feel disaffected to the power structure is much higher. Americans were crankier, we're more individualistic, we're more freedom oriented. So that bar is a lower bar for us to get disaffected.
Right.
You know, Bernie bros are right wingers over in Europe. That's how that's how status they are over there. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much.
Not much.
No. A
No.
liberal Democrat would be considered a member of the Conservative Party.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, from everything I know, as well, especially over there, like England and Scotland and stuff. Because we also have a mutual friend who's one of the, as you mentioned before, you maybe find like a handful in these countries. We have a friend over in Scotland who actually runs the the Scottish Libertarian podcast. And he's always telling me stories about how just insane it is over there.
Oh, but there's no assumption. There's the concept of freedom doesn't even enter into the discussion. The only, as I tell them, I said, all you guys are doing is arguing over the spoils.
Yeah.
You know, oh, well, where should we spend the money we just stole from everybody? They're not trying to actually have freedom over there. It's not even a discussion point.
No.
And then when I show up as an American and I say, well, what about this? They go like, what? We don't talk about things like that.
We don't do that here.
No,
Yeah.
we don't do that freedom thing over here. What are you talking about? You know,
that's frowned upon in these parts.
Yeah.
And that's everywhere in the world, pretty much. Everywhere in all the countries I've visited, it's pretty much the same thing. Yeah. Anyway, well, I think that technology can help people be free now that we couldn't do in the 70s. But on the other hand, the surveillance state is much larger now than it was then. There really wasn't one back then. You really could get away from it all, you know, cross a state border and be freer in places like Nevada. You know, now I'm looking at my office is here in Nevada. As I say, I don't live anywhere. So, but with COVID, I had to come back to the United States. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here right now. This is an example. I was in the Philippines when it hit, and I was in the middle of a 9-country tour giving speeches. And so COVID hit, and I'm in the Philippines, and they said, you've got 72 hours to get out of the country or we're declaring martial law. So 72 hours, martial law. Philippine citizens were not allowed out on the street because of COVID. You had to apply and get a license, one license per family. Only one family member was allowed to leave the house on Tuesday and Thursday to go shopping. So the stores were only open on Tuesday and Thursday, and only pharmacies and food stores.
Oh, that's horrible.
Okay, so I look at that and I go like, I better go back to the United States because all these other countries are just completely crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We complain a lot here, but yeah.
That's Duarte down there, that crazy guy who tells people to shoot drug dealers in the head out in the street, right? Isn't he the one who's still running the Philippines?
He is Duterte, and Duterte.
Yeah.
And he and their short name for his name is 230, which when you pronounce it is Duterte. So on newspaper headlines, sometimes it'll say 230 says, because it's shorter than Duterte. Anyway,
that's funny.
Economically, he's done a really good job, but the concept of civil liberties doesn't exist.
Oh yeah.
It really doesn't in a lot of Asian countries.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, not at all.
Well, that's why like we've been saying, all we can do is keep, living the way we do, and trying to encourage other people to try the same thing, and hopefully enough people will start branching out and finding ways to just, like you're saying with the surveillance state. It's funny too, because you said right before that, you said, the improvements in technology will help us a lot, but there's this. I mean, I've been, for the longest time, one of my favorite sayings is that technology is both our great savior and the bane of our existence all at the same time.
Of course.
But all you can do is take advantage of the technologies you can use for your own betterment. Practice as great a security culture as you can, because you have to understand that nothing's private anymore, pretty much anything. I mean, I discuss things openly, and I try to use like encryption apps and stuff like that, but I don't trust that they're not going to be taken over at some point or haven't already. But I'm a little more freer with my mouth because I talked about a lot of stuff on nationally syndicated radio for 2 years. I just stopped caring. I'm like, I'm going to talk about this stuff. They never kicked me off the air. No alphabet agency ever. The only time the alphabet agency ever contacted with me was when I had my legal problems years ago, and a bunch of conservatives reported me for threats on President Trump's life because I wore a shirt that said "Kill the President" because they're idiots and can't spell. But other than that, they never contacted me, and I talked about this stuff free. I mean, I encourage people to become tax. I tried to use their terminology, tax protesters or whatever.
Yeah.
I tried not to use the word evasion.
No, never.
But I talked about this stuff. I talked about it publicly, and they never came after me. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'll be as careful as I can, but I'm still going to talk about these things. I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm not trying to lead anybody anymore like I was years ago. But if it's not put out there if it's not put out into the lexicon, then the very people we're talking about are never going to have their own aha moment.
And one of the problems is that if you advocate doing an illegal act, they can pick you up for conspiracy.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So
100%.
all of this stuff, and the same thing happened with Tom Marshall, is that you basically have to use words. You have to say what you mean, but you can't advocate that anybody do anything illegal. And you always have to say, oh, and I'm not saying you shouldn't pay your taxes.
Right.
I'm not suggesting you don't pay, but you should maximize your deductions.
Right.
Fine. But the thing is that all of these sorts of games, these are games. And, theoretically, the First Amendment says I can advocate certain illegal acts, but you can't, not in the real world. Not if you don't want heat. You don't want heat. Everything with Vonu is a trade-off, right? It's a trade-off. So Tom lived this lifestyle for at least a couple of years where he literally hardly ever got in his van. This was SMUM that I was talking about, where he and Roberta, see, here's another concept. There's a lot of concepts that Marshall talked about and that we did back then that are not being talked about now, like crypto culture. Now that has a whole new meaning. But back then it was like, how do I raise crops without looking like crops? So in British Columbia, berries work really well, tomatoes sometimes, but they can't be in straight rows and so on and so forth. But that's something that should be an RtA, I think, right?
I love it.
Self-sufficiency, normally it's a row of tomatoes, but crypto culture has to be a hidden form of farming. So he lived in this SMUM lifestyle, which was basically in the summer, of course, you'd live under tarps because it's sunny and warm. But in the winter in Southern Oregon, it's cold and wet. So they moved into styrofoam structures that you couldn't stand up in, but you could sit up in them. But they were insulated enough that you didn't have to have heat. Your body heat would get it to 70 degrees. So, once again, the engineer in Tom solved that problem. But on the other hand, he was eating what he had stored for the winter. This is not subsistence farming. This is subsistence existence. Right. But on the other hand, he never saw any human beings for like 2 years. An occasional plane would fly over. So you see what I'm saying? It's all a matter of what are the trade-offs? What's the cost-benefit analysis? Now, most people, they look at the cost-benefit analysis and they say, you know what, I'm going to remain servile and I'm going to sit here in my house. And I go like, well, do you own your house? Oh, yes, I own the house. I said, really? What happens if you don't pay your property tax? Do you still own the house? No, they'll take it away from me. Oh, so you're renting it from the government. I just want to make sure you don't own your house. You're renting it from the government and you paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for that privilege. Okay, let's be clear what's happening here. So,
right.
You see what I'm saying? So the problem is that they think reality is one thing when it's not that at all. Reality is something different from what they perceive, but they've been inculcated and all their friends believe the same reality. So they do it. But to me, I'm actually not that interested in the theory of Vonu. I went through that too many years ago. To me, it's all about the practice of Vonu. what's the trade-off? What's the cost and what's the benefit of doing X? And to me, that's the critical thing. So I only had a chance to look at one issue of RtA, but it was like really long.
It's 100 pages. It comes out once a month. And so we
Jeez.
really, we give you about 30 days to read 100 pages. So you gotta want it.
Well, I was impressed with that. That's awesome because, and it was not much theory, a lot of practice, which I think is good too, because what you were saying before was that, you know, people have to see it being done. Well, okay, here's 100 pages of people doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really critical.
Well, that's
And
what I mean. Oh, go ahead, though.
I'm sorry. And
No, go ahead.
I really like that we've covered a lot of different ways that people can find freedom.
Right.
We've covered, you know, like homesteading or
Yeah.
living off grid or crypto culture,
Yeah.
cryptocurrency. And so I like the magazine because if you're not ready to take that full on plunge to be a van nomad or a international nomad, then start small. You know, grow your food, see how easy it is, you know, trade your food for your neighbor's eggs, see how easy it is.
Right.
And within these pages, you take a little. I have a couple status friends that kind of follow me everywhere I go, and they just like they hang on every word that I say, and I love going over there because I can see that they're starting to do little things. They started a garden this year, first year ever. Um, they started bartering from our networks that we have on the magazine. So they started buying with crypto, and they started purchasing medicine through a third-party crypto site. And I'm seeing these little, and their status, they love Trump, but I'm
Oh boy,
seeing
do they love
them.
Trump.
They love him. But the nice thing is I've inspired them to take a nibble of freedom. Oh, they like the way it tastes. They had no idea it was so sweet. And so they
Do you
take
live in a
another
rural
nibble.
area? Do you live in a rural area?
Uh, kind of. I mean, compared to New York and yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm on the western slope of Colorado.
Okay.
So I'm in Grand Junction. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've been through here in your travels,
Many
but
times.
yeah, you know, we're not a metro,
Well,
but we're
yeah,
not a
it's a
tiny
city.
town either.
They call it a city, but it's not a really big city, you know.
No.
No, it's a little city, but I love that there's a lot of statists here. It's a big Trump town, very
Yeah.
conservative. But again, these statists, they read the magazine here. There's a lot of Grand Junction people
Why?
that read our
Why do they
magazine.
read it? Are they reading it for the practical tips or to be free? If I can draw that distinction.
I believe they started with the practical tips. I think after that taste of freedom, to have that little kiss to say, I can have a tomato any fucking time I want, and I don't have to pay taxes on it. I don't have to pay
Okay.
sales tax. I don't have to pay tax on gasoline to get it.
Yeah.
I can just have it.
Yeah.
And so then they think, well, what else can I just have? So they go back to the magazine and then they say, well, I don't have to take cold medicine. I can just kind of I can make this stuff, or I can buy salve that's made and I know what's in it. Okay, well, that tastes pretty sweet. Well, I'm going to go back to the magazine, see what else I can find. And before you know it, they're looking at property. They're looking at property that they can have a commune on. And I'm like, God bless you. Go, man, go.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think it starts small. And I think the more diverse your content, part of the reason why I loved Mother Nature News and a lot of the Vonu stuff is just because it's so diverse. You know, it can be as intense for the seasoned, but it can also start small for the people that are just starting out. And I think every walk of life and every experience level can find something of use in our pages.
Well, I think that a lot of left-wing statists are anti-establishment. You see what I'm saying? I think even Bernie Bros, who may be socialist, they're anti-establishment. And so RtA satisfies them being anti-establishment. You see what I'm saying? It's anti-authoritarian, which they're not, but they look at the establishment as being gigantic capitalists, you know, companies running everything. even though I tell them, well, they don't have any guns. It's the state has the guns. So let's start with the guys that have the guns first, and we'll worry about corporate power later. Okay. Corporations have influence. They don't have power. The state has power. But the point is that they're anti-establishment. And I think that can attract a left-wing statist to Vonu. I'm exaggerating here, but you know what I'm saying, to certainly being self-sufficient.
Yeah.
So they don't have to buy the man's goods.
I don't think you're being that, I don't think you're being that big. I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of these anti-establishment people that don't actually know that they're still very establishment, they just need a direction. They know that they're unhappy. They can tell you 6 reasons why they're unhappy, but they can't give you 6 reasons why the establishment that they still vote for is making them unhappy.
No.
They just need a direction. And I think,
but I do think they blame it on other people. They don't blame it on themselves.
oh, of course not. There's so much
man.
ignorance. It's
Yes.
all the ignorance. And I think, again, when they start to see the state demonizes free thinking, it always has.
Always
the
has.
State demonizes being independent, always has.
Always.
And so these people don't know. These people are Americans living in a free place that have no idea that their freedom could be so much.
Yes.
And I think these people that need a direction, I think it's so funny that they're waiting for the state to tell them how to overthrow the state.
Yes.
And so if we can inspire them and give them a direction and say, you don't have to be militant about your anti-establishment. You can do these 3 things, find out how free that you can be with those 3 things and see where it leads you. And I think that kind of freedom to grow is really what helps us attract an audience too.
All right. So I'm going to wax philosophical for a second. I think that the problem that they have, and I'm going to say progressives, because one of the founding principles of progressivism comes from Marxism, which is that if I change the economic status of a person, then their psychology will change and freedom will come to everybody. Let's not forget that Marxist believed in an anarchist. He believed in no state.
Right.
But the only way we could get there is if the situation changed, because if the situation changes, then my psychology and everybody's psychology will change. So they're waiting for the state to make that change.
Yes.
Whereas a Vonuan says, nobody's going to make the change. I got to do it myself.
Yep.
I can't sit around here and wait. I got to go do it now. Otherwise, it's never going to happen, probably. And that's the problem. That's the psychological thing they have to get over, that it's in their control, not in the state's control. And that they don't have to, when they say, well, if one person's hungry, everybody's hungry. Or if one person's not free, everybody's not free. Well, no, that doesn't even make plain sense. Parse the words. That's just gibberish. But that's what they believe. They literally believe that I can't be free until everybody's free. Really? Why is that?
Well, that's what they're taught too. That they're we're what do you call it? We're the majority rules. What is that word?
Well, it's majoritarian.
Yeah, we're that. So we're waiting for everyone else to agree with us before we can move forward. But again, to your point, those Marxists can still wait for their great man to show up. But in the meantime, grow your tomatoes, barter,
Yeah. And I think that's where you're picking a few people off. You're picking a few people off who say, well, I still want the state to make us all free, but in the meantime, I'll go swap a tomato or 2.
You start small, and maybe those people in their education, we've all learned so much in our years of being free. And my hope is that those people will also increase their freedom and decrease their ignorance on their path of waiting for the great man. Hopefully at some point they'll say, God damn it, I'm the great man.
It's not Joe Biden?
Yeah, right.
I'm confused. I thought he was. Oh, okay. My mistake.
Yeah. So it's the hope.
All right. How can I help you guys out?
Well, I mean, you are just a infinite wealth of information, and you are right along with what our purpose is. If you'd like to be a contributor, I welcome that. If you'd like to advertise, I welcome that.
Okay, I actually filled in something for advertising, so you should actually have my email for advertising already.
I do. I just I want to know more about what type of advertising you're looking for, what package you'd like to purchase, what.
I just need more information.
Okay, well, I can absolutely break that down. We've got several packages that we've got on our website, and I did I send you the packages, or did Jim send you the
No,
website?
I went there and got the magazine, so I guess I've been to the. Is it RtA magazine if I remember?
It's
RtA
rtamagazine.com.
magazine.com.
Okay, all right, okay, all right. Now, in terms of articles, what I would say is right now RtA is very into self-sufficiency. So to tell the truth, what I would want to do is not talk about what you're already talking about.
I agree.
Things like really going back to a certain extent to Tom Marshall saying, here's 5 ways you can do it. RtA has been talking mainly about this way and this way, but here's 3 more. Seasteading. Do you know Mark Jaffe?
I know
the
that
name
name.
sounds familiar, but
Do you
I
know
don't.
the Seasteading Foundation, I think it's called?
Or is it, or is it the sea? Is there 2 of them? Because there's a Seasteading Institute, which
I can't remember.
I think it's the Seasteading Institute, and it's oh, what's his name?
Peter Thiel.
Friedman. Yeah, but Friedman. Milton Friedman's grandchild, Patrick,
David
is
Friedman.
part of that.
David Friedman.
Well, no, David's his son. David's his son. Patrick is Milton's grandson. Patrick.
Okay.
Patrick is part of the Seasteading Institute, as far as I remember.
Well, Peter Thiel's the money behind it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, and Mark Jaffe is a libertarian, and he was involved with our New Country Foundation, and he writes the occasional article for Reason on seasteading. But I would want to talk about that. I would want to talk about international nomadism, some of the things that you can do that haven't been covered in the magazine that I've seen, but I've only seen one issue.
No, all of that stuff would be welcome because,
Yes.
like you said, I mean, it's all about giving people as many tools as they could possibly pick from. So while we what we've done, especially since I joined up, I partnered up with Dharma and I guess for the July issue, and from then on it's the 2 of us running things. We've tried to pick a theme every month, so our other contributors have a kind of
direction
guideline to work with, but there's nothing concrete, and it's all about getting whatever information we can out to people, especially things that they're not aware of yet. To say, hey, here's a possibility, you could try this, exactly what you're saying, that's great for me. I love that type of stuff. We need more of it.
We do need more of it, and we need more practical. We've got some of the obvious freedom stuff, and we've got some Vonu stuff thanks to Shane, but again, global Vonu stuff. I would really love more practical, not as well known items. That's really what we want too, because again, I want to be all levels of getting freedom. And we're in the beginner area, and I really want to get into more of the seasoned freedom content, which is, I think, what you're talking about. And I love it. I want it.
Well, like I say, my perspective will be a little different.
Perfect. I love it.
Okay.
I think in order to maintain a diverse group of people, of freedom fighters, of diplomats to autonomy, is we need people that are a little different. We need people that are not our normal, which is great.
Yes. Well, I mean, listen, I used to be heavily into self-sufficient farming, et cetera, crypto culture. I did that. But maybe I'll write a short article on crypto culture because that's a pretty unusual topic. But I'll only write about topics nobody else is writing about.
That's great. So March's issue, it's going to be tight with this deadline. March's issue generally is the first of the month for each issue, since we do come out monthly. Our issues come out on the 15th of every month. So we're doing things a little bit different in March, where we're going to have Silas or Jeremy here proofread the content first, and then I'll design it into the magazine after it's read. So we'll be taking content, probably late submissions until the 4th of March.
Let me just work on April. Let me think about April.
Yeah,
The theme
That
for
sounds
great.
great.
April?
I don't have a theme yet for April. We really try and stay current eventish, and things change so rapidly right now that it's been kind of hard. If you've got a theme that you'd like to see, I take suggestions all the time.
Think about it. I'll think about it.
But
Yeah,
I do have a feeling that just based on our conversation here and the stuff that you're talking about that you would like to offer, I don't think the theme is necessarily going to matter. I think
I agree.
your stuff. There's a section. We've kind of rotated the sections around a little bit somewhat, but there's always going to be a section that it doesn't have to be theme orientated.
Correct. We have quite a few contributors.
If we have practical information that we can give our subscribers, that we want to give it to them. It doesn't, the theme is just the kind, like I said, because we have people that are not as well seasoned as you or even I or Dharma, who are newer to this, who just want an outlet because they didn't have anything, and we came across them and they said, "Hey, you want to write for us?" And they said, "Okay." So it helps people with that who have less experience, give them not, like I said, a very loose structure. But yeah, where your type of stuff I think would fit in pretty much every single month. So
Absolutely. I
that
agree.
would be a problem.
All right.
I absolutely agree. And we do have, we have a lot of content writers, and not all of them follow a theme.
Right.
Our homeopathy, essential oils and food sections never follow a theme.
Right. Okay.
Like it's just essential oils, and
Right.
sometimes it's relevant for the season, and sometimes it's just good to have.
Right.
So, and I think Vonu is the same. Vonu follows a theme, but it's always Vonu.
Right.
And I think the theme for our magazine every month, to Silas's point, Jeremy's point, always is freedom.
Yeah.
And that's always the theme.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I will ponder it.
that.
I will ponder it. I have your email address, so I'll send it to you.
I'll send some more package information. I'll send some
Please.
other issues to our magazine so you can flip
Okay.
through previous
That would be
issues
great.
and just kind of take a look at some things, and we can talk kind of what type of ad you're looking for and what type of package interests you, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. All right, lady and gentlemen, very nice meeting you. So
Oh,
nice
this
is
meeting
mine.
fellow travelers.
Thank you so much for your time today. I'm so glad I was able to take part in this today. There was a kind of question because I'm traveling at the moment. I'm on my way to go visit some friends right now, but this was spectacular. It was an honor to meet and talk to you like this. This was great, and I look forward to hopefully continuing working together in the future. And thank you very much for your time today. This has been excellent.
No, it's my pleasure to have connected with you all. It's my honor. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank
Keep
you.
up the
You
good
made my
fight.
day. Thank you so much. And
All right.
we'll talk soon. Thank you again.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Have a great
Cheers.
day. All right.
Baby, that was so good.
Oh, I went a little over my half hour limit, but whatever. That was fucking fun.
If there was anybody that would have had a good time in this particular meeting, it had to have been you, just because you've got a lot of that background with the Vonu stuff. But what a cool fucking guy. 2 interviews in a row. That was freaking awesome.
And we didn't record, and we didn't record this one either, did we?
We sure fuck did, but I started a little
Oh
late.
yeah,
But I
did. This one's all Patreon content. Fuck yeah, this is great.
Oh yeah, this is a good one. I'm not going to edit it though. I'm just going to put it up.
No, put it up exactly as it is. Shane probably could have gotten a little like deeper in with him stuff because he's a little more knowledgeable. But damn, this is fun. This is great.
This was a good one. Yeah.
Fuck, he's been what is he like? I guess like 70 years old then, because he said he was 19 and 70. So yeah, like 70. Holy shit.
Yeah, he's one of the originals, man. He's
this
doing
is
this
fucking
since 71.
spectacular.
Ah.
And I can't believe you managed, like, thanks to Jim, you managed to find him before Shane did. That's fucking crazy.
I told Shane all about him, and he was like, I'm not familiar with them. I'll have to look up the book. And yeah. Boom goes the dynamite. Who's your daddy?
Well, that was me.